The wrestling world has been rocked to its very core, and what I'm about to tell you will make your blood boil with the injustice of it all. Becky Lynch, the woman who clawed her way to the top of WWE, who broke barriers and shattered glass ceilings, has been forced to relinquish her championship after suffering what sources are calling a career-threatening injury that occurred just yesterday during what was supposed to be a routine training session. But here's what's going to make you absolutely furious: this wasn't just some freak accident. Oh no, this goes much deeper, and the more you learn about what really happened, the more you'll realize that this could have been prevented if certain people in power had actually given a damn about wrestlers' safety instead of pushing their precious profit margins. Let me tell you something that's going to make your skin crawl. While Becky Lynch was writhing in agony yesterday, dealing with what medical experts are describing as potentially the most severe injury of her career, WWE executives were reportedly in meetings discussing how to spin this narrative for maximum dramatic effect. That's right, they were thinking about ratings while their top female superstar was being rushed to the hospital. And you want to know the most disgusting part? Sources close to the situation are telling me that this injury could have been avoided entirely if WWE had implemented proper safety protocols that other wrestling organizations have been using for years. But instead, they cut corners, ignored warnings from medical staff, and now one of the greatest female wrestlers of all time might never be the same again. The injury itself is so severe that I can barely bring myself to describe it. We're talking about damage that goes beyond just physical. This is the kind of injury that doesn't just heal with time and physical therapy. This is career-altering, life-changing trauma that will affect everything Becky does from this moment forward. And the fact that it happened because of negligence makes it 1,000 times worse. Quick question for you in the comments: do you think WWE prioritizes profit over wrestler safety? Drop your thoughts below because this conversation needs to happen ***, but let's talk about what this really means for the wrestling industry as a whole. Becky Lynch isn't just another wrestler, she's a pioneer. She's the woman who proved that female wrestlers could main event WrestleMania and draw the same crowds as the men. She's the one who fought tooth and nail for equal treatment, equal pay, and equal respect in an industry that has historically treated women as afterthoughts. And now, at the peak of her career, when she should be cementing her legacy as one of the greatest of all time, it's all being ripped away from her because someone, somewhere, decided that safety protocols were too expensive or too time-consuming to implement properly. The wrestling community is in absolute chaos right now. Social media is exploding with outrage from fans who are demanding answers. Fellow wrestlers, both male and female, are speaking out about the dangerous working conditions they face every single day. And WWE? They're staying suspiciously quiet, probably hoping this all blows over so they can get back to business as usual. But here's what they don't understand: this isn't going away. This is bigger than just one injury. This is about an entire system that treats its performers like disposable commodities instead of human beings with families, dreams, and futures that extend far beyond the wrestling ring. Let me paint you a picture of what yesterday looked like from Becky's perspective. She walked into the training facility like she had hundreds of times before, probably thinking about her upcoming matches, maybe planning her next character development, or considering how she wanted to elevate the women's division even further. She had no idea that within hours, everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed for, would come crashing down around her. The injury occurred during what should have been a standard training drill. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean absolutely infuriating. Multiple sources are telling me that the equipment being used wasn't up to industry standards. We're talking about safety gear that hadn't been properly maintained, training surfaces that were in questionable condition, and supervision that was apparently lacking at crucial moments. Here's another question for the comments: what do you think should happen to WWE officials if it's proven they knew about these safety issues and ignored them? Now, I need to be clear about something because I know WWE's legal team watches these videos like hawks. Everything I'm telling you is based on information from multiple credible sources within the wrestling industry. These are people who work closely with WWE, who have first-hand knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes, and who are so disgusted by what happened that they're willing to speak out despite the potential consequences to their own careers. The injury itself involves multiple areas of Becky's body, but the most concerning damage is to her neck and spine. We're talking about the kind of injury that requires immediate surgery, months of rehabilitation, and even then, there's no guarantee of a full recovery. The doctors treating her have been very careful with their language, but reading between the lines, it's clear that this is as serious as it gets. And here's something that's going to make you want to punch a wall: this isn't the first time something like this has happened. WWE has a long, documented history of injuries that could have been prevented with proper safety measures. But instead of learning from these incidents and making meaningful changes, they just pay out settlements, make their legal problems disappear, and continue operating the same way they always have. The financial implications alone are staggering. Becky Lynch is one of WWE's biggest draws, especially in the women's division. Her merchandise sales, ticket sales, and television ratings are through the roof. Losing her, even temporarily, is going to cost WWE millions of dollars. But apparently, those millions weren't worth spending on proper safety equipment and protocols that could have prevented this entire situation. What makes this even more tragic is the timing. Becky was at the absolute peak of her powers. Her character work has never been better, her in-ring performance was reaching new heights, and she was setting up what could have been the greatest feuds of her career. All of that is now on indefinite hold, and depending on the severity of her injuries, it might never happen at all. The women's division is going to be absolutely devastated by this loss. Becky wasn't just a champion, she was the backbone of women's wrestling in WWE. She was the one who made everyone else better just by being in the ring with them. She elevated storylines, elevated performances, and elevated the entire perception of what women's wrestling could be. Comment below, who do you think can fill the massive void left by Becky's injury, and do you think anyone actually can? But here's what really gets me fired up about this whole situation: the complete and utter lack of transparency from WWE. When this news first broke, their initial statement was so vague and corporate that it told us absolutely nothing about what actually happened. They used phrases like unfortunate incident and unforeseen circumstances without taking any responsibility or providing any real information about how they plan to prevent this from happening again. Meanwhile, Becky herself has been remarkably composed in her public statements, even though she has every right to be absolutely furious. Her social media posts have been gracious and professional, thanking fans for their support and promising to come back stronger than ever. But sources close to her are saying that privately, she's devastated not just by the injury itself, but by the circumstances that led to it. The legal implications of this situation are enormous. If it can be proven that WWE's negligence contributed to this injury, we could be looking at a lawsuit that makes previous wrestling injury cases look like small claims court. We're talking about potential damages that could reach into the tens of millions of dollars, especially when you consider lost earnings, medical expenses, pain and suffering, and the long-term impact on Becky's career and quality of life. And let's talk about the precedent this sets for other wrestlers. If WWE can't even keep their biggest stars safe during routine training, what does that say about the safety of everyone else on the roster? How many other wrestlers are now wondering if they're next? How many are considering whether the risks are worth it anymore? The fan reaction has been absolutely explosive. WWE's social media accounts are being flooded with angry comments demanding answers and accountability. Hashtags calling for WWE to implement better safety measures are trending worldwide. And perhaps most telling of all, several major sponsors are reportedly evaluating their relationships with WWE in light of this incident. This is about more than just one wrestler getting injured. This is about an entire culture within WWE that treats performer safety as secondary to entertainment value and profit margins. It's about a system where wrestlers are pressured to work through injuries, where safety concerns are dismissed as weakness, and where the show must go on regardless of the human cost. Let me know in the comments, do you think this injury will actually force WWE to make meaningful changes to their safety protocols, or will they just wait for the outrage to die down? The ripple effects of this injury are going to be felt throughout the entire wrestling industry. Other promotions are already using this as an opportunity to highlight their own safety records and protocols. Independent wrestlers are speaking out about the pressure they face to work in unsafe conditions. And medical professionals who work with wrestlers are calling for industry-wide reforms. But here's what really breaks my heart about this whole situation: Becky Lynch didn't just lose her championship yesterday. She lost something much more precious, the certainty that she would be able to continue doing what she loves on her own terms. The injury has taken away her agency, her choice about when and how her career might end, and replaced it with uncertainty and medical realities that she never should have had to face. The championship that she's being forced to relinquish represents so much more than just a title belt. It represents years of struggle, sacrifice, and determination. It represents breaking through barriers that seemed impossible to break. It represents proving doubters wrong and exceeding everyone's expectations. And now it's being taken away not because she was beaten in fair competition, but because safety protocols failed her when she needed them most. The wrestling world has lost more than just a champion. We've lost a leader, an inspiration, and a trailblazer who was nowhere near finished with everything she wanted to accomplish. And the fact that this loss was preventable makes it infinitely more tragic and infuriating. The investigation into what exactly happened during the training session is ongoing, but early reports suggest a perfect storm of equipment failure, inadequate supervision, and protocols that weren't followed properly. Each of these factors alone might not have caused such a severe injury, but combined, they created a situation where disaster was almost inevitable. What's particularly galling is that similar injuries have happened in other wrestling organizations, and the lessons learned from those incidents were widely shared throughout the industry. The safety measures that could have prevented Becky's injury weren't experimental or untested, they were established best practices that WWE apparently chose not to implement fully. The medical team treating Becky's injuries includes some of the top specialists in sports medicine and spinal injuries. While they're optimistic about her eventual recovery, they're being very clear that this is going to be a long, difficult process with no guarantees about what her physical capabilities will be when it's over. Final question for the comments: how do you think this injury will change Becky Lynch's career trajectory? And what do you hope to see from WWE in terms of accountability and change? As I wrap up this devastating breakdown of what may be the most significant injury in recent WWE history, I want you to remember that behind all the corporate statements, legal implications, and industry analysis, there's a human being whose life has been forever changed by decisions that were made by people who will never face the consequences of those choices. Becky Lynch deserves better. Every wrestler deserves better. And until WWE and the wrestling industry as a whole start treating performer safety as the top priority it should be, we're going to keep seeing preventable tragedies like this one. The wrestling world will never be quite the same without Becky Lynch at the top of her game. Her forced relinquishment of the championship isn't just the end of a title reign, it's a stark reminder of what happens when profit is prioritized over people, and entertainment is valued more than the human beings who make it possible. This story is far from over, and the ramifications of yesterday's injury will be felt for years to come. But if there's any justice in this world, Becky Lynch's sacrifice won't be in vain, and the changes that need to happen will finally be made before another superstar has to pay such a devastating price. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because I'll be following this story closely and bringing you updates as they develop. The wrestling world needs to know the truth about what happened, why it happened, and what needs to change to make sure it never happens again.